So here we're going to have a quick look at what I call the context toolbar. So that is, if I click in one of my individual widgets, we see under the main black toolbar, there are some extra icons that appear. Now, if I'm in an exploration view, I get all of these icons, but if I go into a chart, I only see a small section of them. So I'll go to an exploration view and go through and explain what each of these are, or at least the ones that you need to know about. So the first one we have in here is the export button, and this allows you to export the data in your view to an Excel file, which is really good for sharing data with someone who doesn't have access to the system, or for you to just take it out and do some work offline. Now, when you click that, by default, if you just click export, you will get exactly what is in the view as you are looking at it. But if we have some context elements, so some items hidden up in the title bar here, they will appear in little tick boxes. And if I tick one of those, it allows me to export multiple tabs. So for example, if I have a report that I'm looking at and I have business units up in my title area, I can tick this, and then when I do an export, what it will do is produce me an Excel file where there's a tab for each of my units that I was looking at. So that can be quite useful for that purpose. Next to that icon in the ribbon, we have something called snap commands. Now, I will say that I don't use these very much, so most of it you can do in other ways, but it's a way of you filtering and sorting and rearranging a view based on text entry. So the one that I do find potentially quite useful is the find option. So if you have a large number of rows, so again, something like business units, you can select find and type in the thing that you are looking for, and it will filter down to that row. And that can be quite useful. And you don't have to put in the full name. It will search for partial strings as well. But obviously, if there is a little bit of text that appears in multiple rows, it will find more than one result. But that can be quite useful. There are plenty of other snap commands, and as you see, when we tick it to go into the snap command, it gives us some examples of what we've got available in there. And what we will have available for you is the documentation that gives you some more information on those snap commands of what you may want to do. So if I keep moving on, there is this cube view format available for us as well. So by default, a view will normally be formatted with all of your numbers in a certain way. But in here, you can redefine that to a certain format as you would desire. And of course, there is a custom format option in here in addition to some predefined formats. So you can format it in pretty much any way that you want. Next to that, we have something called swap rows and columns. And if I click that, it is as simple as it swapping the rows and columns that we were looking at. So it can be potentially quite useful depending on the data you're looking at. So generally we will often work with time across our columns, so months across the columns, but you may want to be in a position where you flip that over to the rows instead. So it all just sort of depends on the data you are looking at, but it's just a quick click and you can filter it each way. So that can be quite useful. And then next to that, we have our suppress rows or columns option. So if I tick this suppress zeros, I get a couple of options. So I can choose rows, columns, or all, which is both of them. And what that will do is in our view, if we have a column or a row that only contains zeros or blanks, it will hide them. Now, that's useful when you are wanting to export a large amount of data and you want to hide cells that have no data in them. But when you're working with a planning application, you probably don't want to be suppressing zeros because you may find yourself potentially, say, suppressing a whole year that you have just not got around to entering data into yet. So mostly useful when you are reporting and analysing data that is already entered. But if we keep going along, there is a refresh button. So similar to the refresh that is up in the main toolbar, this one just refreshes the individual widget you are looking at to make sure you get the most up-to-date data in there. Then if we keep going along, there is a grid refresh option, but you can pretty much ignore that one. Then we have a couple of controls for sandboxes. They are useful, but we will have a separate video that you can watch about sandboxes where we go into a bit more detail on those. And then we have what is currently saying exploration, but if I was looking at a chart, it would be the name of the chart type. And what I can do if I click on that, it lets me choose what chart I want to go to. So I can flip my data from being a exploration sort of cube view into a chart. But you need to make sure that everything is defined in the correct sort of way for your chart to make any sense. So again, we have a separate video where you can get into some charting options for yourself as well. The next icon we have is this little chevron, this little down arrow. So if I tick that or untick it, what it does is it shows and hides the context area. So if it's hidden, it looks a little bit cleaner. We just see the row and column headers that we are interested in. But if you want to see all of your title elements as well and the dimensions, what you do is you tick that and they all appear. And then that allows you to start playing around with the data as well. So that's when you can do more of the slicing and dicing and analysis, because you can order things in the way that you want to see them. Our final icon on the right is yet again something we are going to explain in a separate video, but this is the AI algorithmic forecasting option where you can use automatic forecasting on time series based data. So it is very useful, but there's a lot going on in there. So again, we have a separate video where we can explain all of that.